Hello everyone, welcome to Telerik UI for Blazor video series. My name is Fahad and I'll be going through some of the basic features of TelerikDrawer component. I have 10 years of experience in .NET. I love learning about new technologies and recently I've started teaching programming online. You can find my YouTube channel or Twitter handle by searching QSDrive, or you can send me an email at qsdrive@gmail.com. To learn about TelerikDrawer component, first I'm going to talk about NavMenu component, which comes out of the box with Blazor application. Then I'm going to replace that with TelerikDrawer component. What is mini mode, what is drawer mode, how you can add toggle button, all of that I'm going to cover in this section. Then I'm going to talk about how you can handle selected item changed event to get information about selected item in your TelerikDrawer component. We'll also check out expanded changed event to get the current state of your TelerikDrawer. You can also map local components to expand and collapse your menu items. You can use item templates to customize menu items in your TelerikDrawer component. And you can use templates to add different components in your TelerikDrawer component. You can also set headers and footers for your menu item. So let's first understand how this NavMenu component works, and then I'll replace that with TelerikDrawer component. To understand how this nav menu works, first I'm going to go to my app.razor file to find which default layout I'm using. I'm using main layout as my default layout, which comes out of the box, but you could be using any other layout, so please check which layout you're using as default layout, because we'll be making changes into this layout. Let's go ahead and find where that main layout is. I'm going to open it up. It's inheriting from layout component base, and that's the reason we could use this body render fragment, which is part of layout component base, and it changes depending on which route you are on. So if I navigate between these pages, the route changes and so does the body, but the main layout does not change. The about link that we are showing on top of the page, it stays the same, and so does the nav menu stay the same, which is on the sidebar. And this is what we are going to replace with TelerikDrawer. So let's go ahead and check how this nav menu looks like so that we could add all the properties that this nav menu has in our TelerikDrawer component. Nav menu has the brand name, which is showing on the left top corner of the app. It also has this button, on click of which it calls toggle nav menu, which collapses the menu if the menu is expanded, and it expands the menu if the menu is collapsed. So if I make this smaller, I will get that button, and if I click on it, it expands the menu. If I click on it again, it collapses the menu. It also has links which are showing in nav links. So we're going to need these links in our TelerikDrawer too. These links have properties like text, it has icons, and it has URLs. So we're going to need to have all these properties in a class so that we could create a list of objects of that class, and we could pass it to our TelerikDrawer so that our TelerikDrawer can show these links and we can navigate between components. That's what we're going to do in the next section. To get started with using TelerikDrawer component, I'm going to first create a class which could hold properties like text and URL. I'm going to name it as menu item. Then I'm going to create list of menu items which I could pass it to my TelerikDrawer component so that we could see menu items on our page. Then I'm going to add a button which could expand or collapse our TelerikDrawer component. Let's go ahead and create this class first. For that, I'm going to go to my shared folder and add a class, which I'm going to name it as menu item. And this class will have two properties. One is going to be text. One is going to be text, and another is going to be URL. Because we need text for storing this author's name, and URL so that we can navigate between our components. Once I have the class, then I can create list of this menu items, which I could pass it to my TelerikDrawer component. For that, I'm going to create a private property, which is IEnumerable of type menu item. I'm going to name it as menu items, which is going to be a list of menu items. In here, we're going to create the menu items. So for our application, we have 3 menu items. So I'm going to create 3 menu items with authors, publishers, and books. For that, I'm going to go to my list here and create new menu items. First one is going to be authors, and the URL for authors is home URL. So I'm just going to put / there. And then I'm gonna need 2 more, one for publishers and another for books. And then I'm gonna mention the routes and route for book. Nice. So now we have the class and then the list of object for that class. Now I can create a TelerikDrawer component in which I can pass this menu items. I'm going to remove this NavMenu because we're not going to use that. We're going to use TelerikDrawer component instead. And in TelerikDrawer component, I can pass menu items as data parameter. Once I'm done with that, then I'm gonna have to put this HTML in the content of my TelerikDrawer component. So I'm gonna create content in which I'm gonna put this HTML in which the body changes depending on which route you're on, but this HTML is going to stay the same. Sweet. So now we're going to need a button on click of which we could either expand or collapse our TelerikDrawer component. So I'm going to add that button here. I'm going to say it's a Telerik button, and I'm going to set icon of it to menu so that it makes sense. Say icon name as menu. And on click of which I would like to toggle my TelerikDrawer component. That means if my TelerikDrawer component is collapsed, then I want it to expand. And if it's expanded, then I want to collapse. So for that, we're going to need the reference of TelerikDrawer component because that toggle async function is in TelerikDrawer component. For that, let's go ahead and create a reference of our TelerikDrawer component. I'm going to create a private property, which is going to be TelerikDrawer of type menu item, and I'm gonna name it as TelerikDrawer and then pass it to my TelerikDrawer as reference. I'm gonna say reference is equal to TelerikDrawer, and then I'm gonna call the method which is there in this TelerikDrawer. So let's wrap this around @ and call a method which is going to be TelerikDrawer dot toggle async. And that's all you need to do to get started with using TelerikDrawer. Let's go ahead and run this and see how that looks. Now I have this toggle button on click of which it expands my nav menu in which it's showing authors, publishers, and books. I'm going to click on publisher, it navigates to the publishers page. I'm going to click on books and it navigates to the books page. And whenever I click on it, it disappears. And we do have this toggle button to expand or collapse. And the background gets blurred so that I can't really do anything on it. That's because this is an overlay mode. We're gonna check out what all modes are there, what are icons, what is image URL, and what's mini mode. We're gonna check all that in the next section. To set icons to my menu item, first I'm gonna create a property in my menu item class called as icon, which is a string property. And then I'm going to go back to my main layout wherever I'm creating my menu item. Here I'm gonna set icon property to icon name.user for my author's menu item. Icon name is font icons library provided by Telerik. Similarly to authors, I'm gonna set icons to my publishers and my books menu items. I'm gonna set icon of publisher to blogger and icon for my books menu item to PDF file. Let's run this and see how that looks. Currently, if I expand my menu, I don't really have any icons for my menu item. I'm going to refresh the page and apply my changes. And if I expand my drawer menu now, I do have icons for my menu items. I can also replace these icons with custom images from my solution. For that, I'm going to go to my menu item and create another property called as image URL. And I'm going to set the image URL of the image that you want to show in place of these icons. For that, you need images for your menu item. I've already added these images in my IMG folder. So that I'm gonna go to my main layout here and add image URL property to my menu items. I'm gonna set image URL property for my authors menu item to authors.png. And I'm gonna set image URL for my publishers and books too. For publisher, this is going to be publishers PNG, and for books, it's going to be books PNG. Let's run this and see how that looks like. If I refresh my page now and expand my drawer component, the images have replaced icons which were set to my menu items. So that means you can use either one of them at a time. If you use both of them, then images will replace your items. You can also add separator between these menu items. For that, I'm gonna go ahead and add a property to my menu item again. And this time, this is going to be a Boolean property. And the name of the property is going to be is separator. And if you want to add a separator between publishers and books, I'm going to create another menu item. But this time, I'm not going to have any properties for this menu item except a separator. And I'm going to set it to true. Let's see how that looks like. If I refresh the page now and expand my menu, it adds this thin line between publishers and books so that you can group your menu items depending on how you want to set up your application. One thing to notice here is the drawer mode, which is set to this TelerikDrawer is overlay. That means the background gets set to blur and I can't really do anything. I need to go to particular component and then I can work on it and then the menu items disappear. But I can change that by setting different drawer mode. I can set drawer mode of my TelerikDrawer to push. That means the UI will get pushed on the right side and you can see the menu items on the left side. Let's go ahead and do that. For that, I'm gonna set TelerikDrawer mode property to drawer mode. I have two drawer modes here. One is overlay, which gets set by default, and I have push, which we'll set now and see how that looks like. I'm gonna refresh my page and apply the changes. And now if I try to expand my TelerikDrawer, UI gets pushed on the right side and I can still see my menu items and I can work on my UI and see the menu items. The menu items are not disappearing when I'm working on my page. And I can still navigate to different components. One thing to notice here is if I navigate to a particular component, then the drawer is getting collapsed. But you can change that by setting mini mode property to true so that you can see at least the icons or the images that you have set to your menu items and you can navigate just by clicking on those images or icons. For that, I'm going to set mini mode property to true and see how that's like. I'm going to refresh the page and apply my changes. Now, even if my drawer component is collapsed, I can see these images. And if I click on them, it navigates to that component so that I don't really have to expand my menu in order to navigate to a particular component. And if I collapse, I have this thin panel on the left side so that I can have more real estate for my customers to work on their pages. That's all about TelerikDrawer component properties. In the next section, I'm going to talk about events. What happens when you change this item selected items changed event gets called. I'm going to talk about that. And I'm also going to talk about the two-way bound property bind selected item and how you can set it to local property and show it on your UI. There are two ways you can get information about selected item from your TelerikDrawer component. One way is by using bind selected item parameter, and another way is by handling selected item changed event. Let's first check bind selected item parameter, and then I'll talk about the event. For that, I'm going to go to my TelerikDrawer component, and here I'm going to set bind selected item parameter to a local property, which is going to be item. And this local property will have to be of type menu item, so that whenever user selects a particular menu item, that can get assigned to this item. Let's go ahead and create that property. It's going to be private. I'm going to call it as item. Now, whenever user selects a menu item from TelerikDrawer, I would like to show its text on top of the page as heading so that user knows which page they're on. For that, I'm going to add some HTML. I'm going to add some HTML in my main layout. It has two div tags. The first div tag will have this toggle button. I'm going to cut that and paste it there. And in the second div tag, we have this label, which is showing some large font size. It has bolder font weight and the color is red. And this is where I would like to show heading of my page. So I'm going to try and access my item here and its text property. Let's also check if it's null or not. Otherwise, we'll get an exception. Let's run this and see how that looks like. I'm going to refresh my page. And if I select a menu item, the heading gets updated on top of the page. If I go to my authors page, author shows on top of the page. That way you could get information about selected item from your TelerikDrawer component. If you want to have more control over it, let's say if you want to log users information whenever the item is getting selected, you can do that by handling selected item changed event. So let's go ahead and do that. For that, I'm going to go to my TelerikDrawer component. Now I can't use bind selected item because you can't have two-way binding and handling the event like selected item changed event. So I'm going to use selected item changed event instead. And this event is going to call a local method, which I'm going to call it as selected item changed handler. And this method takes menu item as parameters. I'm going to say menu item and pass it in this method. We are getting error because we don't have this method. Let's go ahead and create that method. I'm going to create a private method, which is going to be selected item changed handler. It takes menu item as parameter. Menu item. Now we have the item which is getting selected by the user. Now let's go ahead and assign it to our item, which is going to show the text on top of the page. I'm going to copy this item and assign it to menu item. Sweet. You can also log users information. I'm now going to log it in the database. I'm just going to log it in my browser. I'm going to use console.writeLine and say that user has selected plus menu item dot text. Let's run this and see how that looks like. I'm going to refresh the page and apply my changes. And now if I click on a menu item, the text is getting updated on top of the page. And if I open my console, that is also getting logged in my console too. That's how you can handle selected item changed event, use bind selected item parameter. In the next section, I'm going to talk about collapse and expand async events and the properties associated with it. In the beginning of the video, we added this toggle button on click of which the menu gets expanded if it's collapsed. And if I click on it again, it gets collapsed because it was expanded. You can also handle these events individually. For that, I'm going to add two buttons here. One is going to say expand async, on click of which it's going to expand the menu. I'm also going to add another button which is going to say collapse async, on click of which is going to collapse the menu. Let's go ahead and add those buttons in our UI. I'm going to add them right next to my toggle button. They're not going to have any menu, but they're going to call different methods, which is going to be expand async, and another one is going to be collapse async. Let's also set text for them so that we know which button we are clicking on. I'm going to run this. I'm going to refresh the page so that we get those buttons. Now I have these buttons. If I click on expand async, it expands the menu. And if I click on collapse, it collapses the menu. I'm going to click on expand multiple times. It doesn't really do anything after it's expanded. I'm going to collapse and click on it multiple times. It doesn't do anything if once it's collapsed. And this toggle button works like before. You can also get the current state of your TelerikDrawer by handling expanded changed event. Let's go ahead and do that. For that, I'm gonna handle an event which is going to be expanded changed event. And I'm gonna call a local method whenever this event gets fired. And I'm gonna call it as expanded changed handler. This event also passes the new Boolean value of TelerikDrawer. Whenever TelerikDrawer is expanded, it's going to set it as true, and it's going to be false whenever it's collapsed. So let's go ahead and set that new value to our new method. I'm going to pass that value here. We don't have this method. Let's go ahead and create that method. For that, I'm going to go to my code and create a new method, which is going to be expanded changed handler. It takes Boolean value. Now I can catch this value in my local property and show it on top of the page. So instead of these buttons, I want to show what is the current state of my TelerikDrawer. For that, I'm going to need a local property, and I'm going to create that local property as public property. It's going to be Boolean. I'm going to call it as is expanded. And I can set this property to new value whenever this method gets called, whenever the event gets fired. So I'm gonna set is expanded by new value. We also need to show this value on top of the page. So instead of these buttons, I'm gonna show that expanded value, which is going to be is expanded. Now we have the value, the new value, which is getting set whenever the menu gets collapsed or expanded, but we're going to need to set that value to our TelerikDrawer so that our TelerikDrawer knows what the state of TelerikDrawer is. For that, I'm going to set expanded to is expanded. Let's run this and see how this looks like. I'm going to refresh the page. Now we have this label which says false. And if I expand the menu, it turns to true. If I collapse the menu, it turns to false. So that way you could get the current state of the value by handling expanded changed event, also setting expanded property, and also creating a local property so that you can catch that value. You can also use bind expanded parameters so that you could have two-way binding for your TelerikDrawer. So instead of adding this label, I'm going to add a checkbox on click of which is going to expand the menu. And if I unselect it, it's going to collapse the menu. Let's go ahead and do that. So instead of this Boolean value, I'm going to create a Telerik checkbox, which will be bound to our is expanded value. And then we can't have this expanded changed event. This will work fine, but I'm gonna show you how bind expanded works. So I'm gonna remove this and two-way bind that value to my is expanded, which is two-way bound to the checkbox. That will get two-way bound to a TelerikDrawer, and that's what will happen if the menu is collapsed. It will get expanded. If it's expanded, it will get collapsed. Let's run this and see if this works or not. I'm going to refresh the page. Now I have this expanded checkbox. If I click on it, it expands the menu. If I uncheck it, it's going to collapse the menu. And that value gets set whenever I toggle the menu too. You can also have one-way binding. If I navigate to a different component, it gets collapsed. That's because it's two-way bound to the checkbox. But you can have one-way binding. That means if I set it to expanded, it'll stay expanded. It won't get collapsed whenever I navigate between components. And if I set it to collapse, it'll stay collapsed. It won't get expanded. For that, the only thing that I'm going to change is remove this bind and rerun this again. I'm going to refresh the page and apply my changes. Now I have this checkbox. If I click on this and navigate to different components, it navigates and it doesn't get collapsed, even if I'm navigating. And this button doesn't work because it's not bound to our Telerik anymore. That's all about expanded related events and its properties. In the next section, I'm going to talk about item template. You can use item template to customize the way your menu items look like in TelerikDrawer component. Currently, I'm not using any item template, and that's the reason why it shows the default style for all the menu items. Let's go ahead and fix that. For that, I'm going to go to my TelerikDrawer component and add item template here. Now, whatever HTML that I write inside my item template is going to represent my menu item. I want my menu items text to show bold and green. For that, I've added some HTML that I'm going to copy and paste here. And in the span, I would like to show my menu items text. For that, I'm gonna use @context, and if I hit dot, I get all my menu items properties here. I'm gonna use text here. You can also change the name of your context by setting context parameter at item template. I'm gonna set it to item, and from now on, I can use item instead of context for accessing my menu items properties. Let's run this and see how that looks like. I'm going to refresh the page. If I expand my TelerikDrawer component or collapse it, it shows the text. I want it to show icons whenever it's collapsed and show the text whenever it's expanded. Let's fix that. For that, I'm going to add another HTML tag here, which is going to be on the span. It has Kendo class, but I'm using items icon property in order to show that in our item template. We want to show icon in all the cases if the menu is expanded or collapsed, but we want to show the text only when the TelerikDrawer is expanded property is set to true. So I'm going to wrap it around if condition. I'm going to say @if is expanded, then only I would like to show this span. I'm going to cut that and paste it here. Now let's run this and see how that looks like. I'm going to refresh the page and apply my changes. Now it shows the icons whenever the menu is collapsed. If I expand it, then it shows the text, which is green and bold. One thing to notice here is that the app menus, the authors, publishers, and books, they had image URLs. They had images assigned to it. And the other links, they had icons assigned to it. You can group your menu items by adding properties to your menu items. I'm going to add a property which is going to say that authors, publisher, and books, they are app related URLs, and these are other URLs. For that, I'm going to add a property which is going to be group property. And whenever I create menu items, I'm going to set group property for authors, publishers, and books to app. And for GitHub documentation and support, I'm going to set it to others. Let's set this to app first. And for GitHub, I'm going to set it to other. And for the other three links too. Now I can use this group property to show images for my first three URLs. And for the last four URLs, I can show the icons. For that, I'm going to add another if condition. This if condition is going to say if items group property is set to other, then we would like to show the icon, and else I would like to show the image. For that, I'm going to add image tag, and the source property I'm gonna assign it to items image URL property, because that's where we are setting images. That's where we're setting images for authors, publishers, and books. I'm gonna add some space in front of this text so that it looks nice. Now let's run this and see how that looks like. I'm gonna refresh the page. Now it shows images for the first three links for authors, publishers, and books, and it shows icons for the rest of them. That's how you can use item template to customize menu items in your Telerik drawer. In the previous section, I talked about item template, which helped us customize our menu item. If I hover over it, it says it defines the template for each drawer item. I'm going to change this to template and see what it says. It says it defines the template for the whole drawer and it takes precedence over item template. That means now we can customize our whole Telerik drawer instead of just menu items. And now it takes items as parameter, not just items, so that we can loop through them and customize them. Let's loop through them and put the HTML that we used for customizing our menu item in this for each loop. I'm going to cut this HTML and put it here. And instead of collection, I'm going to use the items which are getting passed. Now let's run this and see how that looks like. I'm going to refresh my page and apply my changes. Now if I expand TelerikDrawer, the menu items are right after each other. That's happening is because we don't have any style anymore because we're using template. You'll have to use your own classes, own styles to customize your menu item. And I'm going to use the same class, the same style that TelerikDrawer used, but you can use your own style to customize your items. For that, I'm going to add a div tag here, which is going to show class Kendo drawer items, in which I'm going to add a unordered list. And then I'm going to add this for each loop inside that unordered list. And in for each loop, I'm going to add list item and set the class for the list item as same as what we have for this div, but it's going to be item, not items. And then I'm going to put this HTML in this list item. Let's go ahead and format our code and run it and see how that looks like. If I refresh my page now, the menu items are looking better. Now it's the same style that we applied when we used item template, but now we are looping through each item to show it on our TelerikDrawer component. It has this extra menu item that used to be separator, but it's not showing anymore. Instead of showing the separator, I would like to show headings of my links. I want to show these links are application links and these links are resources links. For that, I'm going to go to my main layout wherever I'm creating menu items, and the text of is separator, I'm going to set it as resources. And the first menu item is going to application, so that we know that authors, publishers, and books are application related URLs. And GitHub documentation support and Telerik, those are resources for people to follow this tutorial. I want to also set nice background and change the font of this text. For that, I'm going to add a method which is going to help me determine if the menu item is a header or not. For that, I added a method which is saying is menu item header. It takes menu items as parameter, and we are checking if the menu item text is application or resources, then it returns true, otherwise it returns false. And I can use this method to determine what class I can apply to my menu items. Let's remove the spaces. And here I can use that method to determine which class I should apply here. I'm gonna write some C# code here. I'm gonna check if is menu item header or not. I'm gonna pass the item to check that. And if this is true, then I'm gonna set the background as secondary. background as secondary, and if it is not, then I don't want to apply any classes here. I can also change the font of my text. For that, I'm gonna check if his header is menu item header or not. I'm gonna pass item here. If this is not true, then we would like to show our regular menu items, which are these. And if that's not true, then I would like to show my header here. And the color of my header is going to be black. Let's format our HTML. I'm gonna say Control KF. That's going to format my HTML. Let's run this now and see how that looks like. I'm gonna refresh my page, apply my changes. And if I expand my TelerikDrawer now, I have headers for my links. It's saying application, it has this gray background, black text, and our regular menu items are looking the way they were looking before. And it also shows resources for my other links. One thing to notice here, it doesn't really do anything whenever you click on it. That's because we need to handle its selected event. That's something that we're going to check in the next section. We're also going to add another component in our TelerikDrawer component and see how that looks like. To navigate between the components, I'm going to use on-click event of this menu items. For that, I'm going to go to my list item in my template. I'm going to find my list item, and I want to handle on-click event of this list item. I want to call a local method, which I'm going to name it as navigate to, and it takes item as parameter. I'm going to go ahead and create that method. It's going to be private void navigate to, and it takes menu item as parameter. Now we're going to need navigation manager to navigate between components. I've already injected navigation manager in my component, and I'm going to use my menu items URL property to navigate. For application, it's going to navigate in between the application, but for resources, it's going to take you to these links. For that, I'm going to say navigation manager. I would like to navigate to menu items URL. We'll also have to update the item that is showing on top of our page so that user knows which page they are on. So we have this item property that we'd like to set to the menu item which is getting selected. So I'm going to say item is equal to menu item which is getting selected. Let's run this and see if that works or not. I'm going to refresh the page and apply my changes. And if I try to click on my menu items, the text is getting updated. I'm able to navigate between the components. So that is working fine. I can also go to the other links and come back. That's how you can use on-click events of your menu items to navigate or do anything extra that you would like to do. You can also add different components in your TelerikDrawer component. For that, I've already created this login display component. It's a pretty simple component. It has this image on the top and it has buttons which says sign up and login. I'm gonna try and add this login display in my TelerikDrawer component, but I want to show that component only when the menu is expanded. So I'm going to say is expanded. When that is true, I would like to show my login display component. Let's run this and see if that works or not. I'm going to refresh my page and apply my changes. And the menu is collapsed and I can't really see anything. But if I expand it, then I see this login display component in my TelerikDrawer component. That's all about TelerikDrawer component. If you have any questions, you can reach out to me on my Twitter handle, or you can send me a email at curiousdrive@gmail.com. Just make sure that you're using this hashtag so that I know which video that you're talking about. Thanks for watching this video. I'll see you in the next one.